Welcome to Gracefully Graying. I'm your host, Attorney Henry Gorenbein. Please go to our YouTube channel to see the interview with Karen McDonald and also visit our Gracefully Graying website. Today on Gracefully Graying, I'm pleased to welcome the Oakland County Prosecutor, Karen McDonald, who, as I was thinking about her interview, has worn many, many hats. She first was an English teacher. She became a lawyer. She started out as an assistant prosecutor with the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office, then went to the Jaffe Law Firm where she specialized in family law, and she and I were involved in cases against each other. She then ran for and became a circuit judge in the family court division in Oakland County. She left the bench, decided to run for prosecutor, and here she is as the Oakland County Prosecutor. It's a pleasure to interview you, and I think this is the fourth time we've done it, so welcome, Karen.
Thank you for having me. Welcome to you. I believe it is the fourth time, and I think it spans maybe over 15 years.
Yeah, we don't care to count. Tell us why you decided to leave a judgeship and run for prosecutor.
Well, it wasn't an easy decision. I think it was a gradual just acknowledgement and observation that my role as a judge it's a wonderful job. It's a great way to serve your community. It's just it was a realization slowly that the things that I feel really strongly about in the criminal justice system, I could not really move the needle on as a judge. By the time a litigant or a victim comes in front of a judge, the person, the decision about who to charge and what to charge them with has already been made. Even sentencing is really confined to guidelines, and judges don't decide whether or not somebody should be charged with a misdemeanor or felony. They don't decide whether or not charge amendments should be made, and they are rarely fact finders. Juries decide guilt or innocence. Additionally, there's just so much the prosecutor can do with regard to diversion programs for our juveniles specifically, attention to abuse and neglect. The kids on that docket, who we know are almost 7 times or more likely to be victims of homelessness, substance abuse, mental health issues, incarceration. So if you look about the one common denominator in that system from birth to all the way up to incarceration and then release, it's the prosecutor. And that really intrigued me. Now, it wasn't easy in that because I was going from a nonpartisan seat to a partisan seat. I think this is the component here that was the most shocking to people. And honestly, I look back at it now and I think, wow, that was a really risky thing to do. But I had to step down a year ahead of the filing deadline for the prosecutor, and I had to face and be a 12-year incumbent who in 40 years had never lost an election in the Democratic primary. I was victorious in that, and then also the general election. So I put a lot on the line, I guess, with no real certainty that it would be successful.
But you did it, and you made.
I did it. I did it with a lot of help from a lot of people.
Yes. And you've done a lot of things. So first of all, Karen, what are the internal reforms that you have made in the prosecutor's office?
A lot. And I think the biggest change is just giving discretion and valuing assistant prosecutors. This office is filled with almost 100 lawyers who really do want to look at things in a different way than we have looked at them in this county for over 40 years. They recognize what's going on in the world. They want to be heard. They want to be valued. They don't want to be robots who have to go to court and say, I have to ask for the highest charge. I have to ask for the highest sentence. I'm not allowed to look at a file and say, what do I think makes sense here? So when you do that, when you really tell, assistant prosecutors, I care what you think. Even before I took office, I interviewed and met with every single employee via Zoom in December before I took office, and we asked them to fill out a survey. And then I met not just the lawyers, but every staff member. And that was really important to me, even though, as my husband pointed out consistently, I wasn't being paid for that. Obviously, I'm not in this for the money. It took 180 hours. There are 180 employees here, but really sitting down and saying what's working here in this office and what's not, and why, and really getting people to the place where I would say we're 60% there, where when I ask, what do you think? Or someone asks, what do you think? They're allowed to say what they think, even if they don't agree. So that is not necessarily a specific policy change, but I couldn't do any of the other things I wanted to do until I addressed that. The culture here is very important. You really aren't going to get a lot done if you don't change culture. And so that was at the top of my list. It is almost every day. And because of that, we have implemented a long list of policy changes that I'm very proud of.
And tell us about some of the policies and changes that you've made to, as you put it, incentivize a healthy work-life balance. Our culture, which has to do with, valuing people, understanding they need flexibility, particularly during COVID, recognizing good work, not putting people in positions and divisions that they're stuck in and they don't want to be in, really listening. And then not focusing necessarily on your trial statistics and the amount of convictions you have, but rather what kind of lawyer you are, what kind of, are you a good public servant? Are you protecting and working with victims of crime? Are you working and preparing properly? And then setting all that aside, in terms of real policy changes, right off the bat, we structurally organize things differently. The drug unit is now the trafficking unit, which focuses on trafficking of narcotics and human trafficking. Michigan is the eighth in the nation, highest for human trafficking. Immediately started engaging with groups outside our office that do nothing but improve our ability to serve our communities, such as the Prosecuting Association of Michigan, which is all the elected officials in the state, Care House, Haven, Common Ground, many law enforcement agencies. I have 3 advisory councils made up of people in the community. The first is a racial justice advisory council, where we have 20 to 30 stakeholders across the county to deal with the issues of race that we are facing in this county, in this state, in this country. I have a defense bar advisory council, so I listen to about 15 to 20 defense attorneys who are giving us input and suggestions on how to do things better. They practice in all of the surrounding counties. And I formed a law enforcement advisory council where I bring, I think about 15 members of the law enforcement community, mostly chiefs, but some not, so that I can hear what their feedback is, and also work with them to get where we want to be in law enforcement reform. And I've really just been very pleased and delighted about how, I noticed this when I was running for judge, and I firmly believe it. We're so divided in this country about what party you're in, and now we're divided about the pandemic and vaccines. And I really believe, regardless of what letter you have after your name, I really have not
met anyone where if I spent time with them, I couldn't leave that interaction with us agreeing on pretty much 80 to 90% of things, even though you might say you're in different parties. And so when you sit down with the Racial Justice Advisory Council, these people aren't anti-law enforcement. They aren't. And when you sit down when I meet with the Law Enforcement Advisory Council, the most police officers, they really want the right thing too. They recognize that we have to be more transparent, but they want to also be safe, and they don't want to be the enemies of the community. So that I'm very proud of, and I just think it's critical and necessary if we're going to just move in the right direction. There's a list of other things. I reversed the prior administration's position on 22 juvenile life without parole, which now I believe does comport with the United States Supreme Court, which says that those sentences are unconstitutional unless somebody is irrevocably corrupt. I immediately engaged the office in all of the problem-solving courts in the county, and there are many. Historically, the office for 12 years, we were not allowed, that the assistant prosecutors did not participate in treatment courts, which, that's something I feel really strongly with, and I think the public does as well. Most of us understand that if somebody's in the criminal justice system, and we're talking about low-level nonviolent offenses, and then the reason is due to a mental health issue or a substance abuse issue, the way to solve that is not incarceration in most cases. So there's a long list of things, but I think.
Karen, I agree with you. In fact, a lot of it is a matter of people don't listen to each other. If you stop and listen, often people have a lot in common. But next question I have is, how has the assistant prosecutor's discretion in charging changed?
We don't have any mandatory charges anymore. We don't automatically do things. For instance, we don't automatically file habitual notices, which can increase somebody's sentence dramatically. In fact, could, if it's the highest habitual, would increase your sentence to life. So we don't automatically do those things. We want people to look. We want our assistant prosecutors to look at the case and say, all right, this is the charge. Is filing habitual? Does it make sense given these circumstances? Oakland County's just been known for years as no deals, which means if you're in this kind of business, that means when the criminal defense attorney comes to the court and says, I'm representing my client, can we talk about a resolution? The resolution was always no deals. You can plead to as charged or go to trial. And when you do that, you essentially make the assistant prosecutor who writes what we call the warrant, charges the making of the charging decision. And just so you know, a lot of people don't really have an understanding of this. We have a division where those lawyers are just making charging decisions. That is at the beginning of the case, where they actually, if you look at the whole span of a case, at that stage, they know the least about the file. That's a police officer coming and saying, we would like a warrant on this person in charge with this offense. And a lot of times they get it absolutely right. But a lot of times there's a lot more information that comes to light as the case progresses. And so we really want lawyers throughout this whole process to be able to look at it and say, what's the best course of action? And many, many times we pursue the absolute highest because it's the right thing to do. Public safety is my number one top priority and concern. I live in this county. I want to be safe in this county. I want my children to be safe in this county. And so nobody, including me, wants a violent person that poses a threat to public safety on the streets. However, the majority of people in the Oakland County Jail are not in that position. So I don't believe we should be incarcerating people for driving while license suspended. particularly if their license was suspended because of fees and parking tickets and they just couldn't pay. I don't believe we should jail people who are can't post a $400, a $500 bond on a very small, low-level nonviolent offense pre-trial. That I don't believe in wealth-based detention. So we want to, I really focused on the crimes that I think the community really cares about, which is human trafficking, domestic violence, sexual assault. We have right now we have a all-time high of violent crime across the nation. And there's several reasons that are being attributed to that. I would say the top one is just we're coming out of a pandemic. People are financially not doing well, and they're struggling. That, and we do see crime rate ebb and flow. But we are putting together right now a group, which I'm hoping will be statewide, to address this increase in violent crime.
Karen, tell us about the Conviction Integrity Unit in your office.
Well, there are about 50 conviction integrity units across the nation in different prosecutors' offices and attorney general's offices. And these are designated people in your office that do not work side by side with the other assistant prosecutors. Their job is to review and investigate prior convictions that have posed new evidence has come to light that can't be addressed has already been appealed, but then since then, new evidence has come to light. And so instead of just having your appeal, which is very difficult to get even the Michigan Supreme Court to even look at your case, this is a way of acknowledging that there are times where we've gotten it wrong. So I'm happy to report that we did a lot of research and preparation and presented to the county executive, and Dave Coulter, and he placed it in his proposed budget, and we're hoping in October the commission will approve it so we can begin it. And that was something I wanted to do, and I'm proud that we're almost there. However, what I didn't anticipate was that very, very early in my administration, through somewhat coincidence, and it's a lengthy story, but I encountered the case of People versus Juwan Deering. Juwan Deering is right now serving a life without parole sentence, and he's been in prison for almost 15 years for a charge that stemmed from a fire in Royal Oak Township where 5 children perished, and that took place in 2000. And for reasons that had nothing to do with innocence, it came on my desk with regard to the arson science that was used to convict him. There's been a lot of changes in arson science, and so there are a lot of convictions that have been overturned because of it. But as we were looking at that, what we realized is that he was convicted based on the arson science and 3 jailhouse informants that testified that he confessed to them while he was being held pre-trial on other matters. I think driving while license suspended. And the prosecution is allowed, pursuant to the law, to use a jailhouse informant. You just have to tell the jury what the jailhouse informant received, if anything, for the testimony, because that goes to somebody's credibility. And unfortunately, what we realized quickly is that though the prosecutor at the time and the law enforcement involved and the informants all testified, they received nothing, no leniency, no charges dropped, no help from the prosecutor at all. In fact, it was not true. And based on what I uncovered, was compelled to immediately report that, obviously, to Juwan Deering's counsel, which is the Innocence Clinic in the University of Michigan, hand over a lot of materials that they never received and could never have known about because they were all internal memos and notations in our files. I had to ask the county executive to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate our own misconduct, and then file a grievance. So that has really been difficult for me. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I have really wrestled with it. I've struggled with it. It's not, and never imagined this is what I would be doing in my first 6 months in office. But look, I believe that we have to be transparent. And I also believe that if we know about our own misconduct, we have to have it independently investigated. And while I wasn't here at the time, and I had nothing to do with it, I have to take responsibility for it. So we are in the middle of that. And I suspect once the Conviction Integrity Unit is up and running, there are a lot of cases out there that where people have been convicted and new evidence has come to light. So it's an unusual thing for this office to be doing. I think the mindset in the past has been, whatever you have to do to win. But, we've all learned a lot, the county, the state, the country, and we have to use that knowledge and do what's fair and just.
Karen, there's been a rise in hate crimes, not only in Michigan, but across the country. What is the Hate Crimes Unit Fair Michigan partnership that you have?
So we developed a designated lawyer who looks at hate crimes. And the reason that takes some specialized knowledge and training is it's based on the laws that are available to us to charge people with. It's not an easy charge, and it's not an easy conviction. Those are crimes that stem from somebody's that were targeted because of somebody's race, ethnicity, how they identify, religion. And not only do you need a prosecutor who really looks at that and is specialized in training with it, you also need someone to help train law enforcement to look at those cases and spot when we know that it was motivated by somebody's prejudice or discrimination. And we partnered with Fair Michigan, who's helped us train our lawyers and helped us with our victims, and those are victims and crimes that evolve around in the LGBTQ community. And we've learned a lot, and we still have a long way to go in terms of training. But I believe that we're in a position in this country right now where we have to at least acknowledge that this is a problem, and we can't just ignore it, and we can't treat it just like every other crime.
Karen, how are you centering racial equity in internal and external decision-making processes within your office?
I've convened a diversity committee made up of lawyers in the office who are from different communities, and asked questions like, what's it like to be a Black man in the prosecutor's office? What's it like to feel like you're different than everybody else? We celebrated Pride Month for the first time in the office's history last month. So I'm listening to lawyers, and then we're educating the office about the racial disparity. The other thing I'm doing is partnering with the University of Michigan to study our data about who we charge, what communities they come from, and is there a disparate impact on certain communities. We know that's true nationally. We know it's true statewide, but people want data. And I think once they see that and that transparency, I think we'll stop arguing about whether there's a racial disparity in the criminal justice system. And I think it will give us a good indication of what we're doing, what judges are doing, how we charge. So before you fix the problem, you actually have to acknowledge there is a problem, and that's what we're doing right now.
Let me change to a different topic, and that is, this show is Gracefully Graying. It's a passion project I've been working on for 3 years now, and we focus on those who are aging or have aging parents, and there's a huge increase in crimes against the elderly. What is being done by your office in this area? And I'm thinking about scams against the elderly, the internet, and some of these other areas. What are
We
your
have a
thoughts?
special victims unit. So any crime that involves an elderly person where they've been victimized because of their age or their fragility, we have specialized prosecutors who deal with that, just like we do if there's a young child involved. The other thing I'm focusing on and making a priority is crimes that don't necessarily involve your traditional way of thinking about like an assault and battery. A lot of times this group of people is targeted and they're victims of fraud and they're losing money. I deal with this issue with my own parents about, I think everything's changed. So I recently had a situation where my father was showing me a video from social media, and because he doesn't have the history and sophistication of social media, even though he is an avid Facebooker, he believed that it was true. And as his daughter, there's everybody listening to this understands this really complicated dynamic. You're now in a position where you're advising your own parents on things. And then, so I understand that. And I talked to my dad a lot about things like that. And then unfortunately in February, my mother passed away, and she was in hospice for quite a long time and had a lot of healthcare workers. And her wedding band and mother's ring was stolen. And there was absolutely no way we could even investigate and figure out who took that. So, these crimes are very important to me on a personal level. The thought of somebody taking advantage of an elderly person, particularly in their last stages of life, is just, it's almost too much to bear. And again, it's because it was a reality in my own life.
Karen, thank you for sharing. What have you found most rewarding since you became prosecutor from your perspective? The people, the people that are in the office, the people that we're impacting. I recently visited a home in Pontiac and spoke with a mother whose son was murdered. And, I couldn't make that better, but the fact that I left my office and went to that house and sat at her kitchen table and explained what the case, what was going on with the case and why we had to make certain decisions, and then just listening. There's such power in that. People want to be heard. They want to know that you care. I'm not sure that kind of exchange has taken place in many, many years in this office. I know certainly there, in fact, it's interesting. That particular story, she and another family member came to our office, and they're victims of crime. They lost somebody with a tragic homicide, and the mother is from Puerto Rico and speaks English, but it was not her first language, and had a run-in with some deputies in the first floor, and she felt like she was mistreated. So she's coming there to talk about the case that her son was murdered, and she gets treated in a way that makes her want to leave. So her nephew was the only person at the meeting, and I said, "This is terrible. I'm sorry that happened to her. And I said, "How about I go visit her?" And he said, "That would be wonderful." And the meeting was over, and the other three people administration that were at the table, I thought for sure were going to say to me, you can't go visit people.
because a lot of times the things around here I want to do are different. And I have a lot of people on my leadership team that sort of second say, are you sure? But they thought it was a great idea. And when many of the lawyers in the different divisions heard that, I think it really sends a message that we value people here. And our job is to protect and advocate for vulnerable people. And if I can't go to a house in Pontiac and sit at a kitchen table with a mother who lost her son, then I shouldn't have my job. That's how I feel.
Karen, you ended on a beautiful high note. We're out of time. Karen McDonald, Oakland County Prosecutor, I want to thank you so much for being our guest on Gracefully Graying. I want to thank our viewers for watching Gracefully Graying, and I ask that everyone watch this video on Gracefully Graying and also visit our YouTube channel and our website at gracefullygraying.com. Karen,
Thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure.